Welcome to our deep dive into rustic design.
Yeah.
You guys sent over a fantastic guide.
Right.
It covers pretty much everything from log cabins to modern takes on the style.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'm ready to trade in my city apartment for a cozy cabin by the time we're done with this.
You know, I think you might be surprised how many ways there are to bring rustic charm
Mm.
into a space.
Mm.
And what I find really fascinating about rustic design is it's not just about the look.
Yeah.
It taps into this really deep desire to connect with nature and with authenticity.
Yeah,
A simpler way of life, even.
I can definitely see that.
Yeah.
I mean, this guide really dives into a ton of details,
Yeah.
from like the types of wood to use and color palettes to
Right.
furniture and even landscaping.
Yeah.
But before we get lost in all that, maybe we should start with the basics.
Yeah.
What actually defines rustic design?
Right.
It feels like it's more than just throwing a cowhide rug on the floor.
Yeah, you're right. It is a lot more nuanced than that. At its core, rustic design really celebrates natural materials, like in their rawest forms.
Oh, yeah.
So think about like weathered wood with all of its knots and grains, exposed stone,
Yeah.
and, even aged metals.
Uh-huh.
It's about kind of embracing those imperfections
Yeah.
and highlighting that beauty that comes with age and use.
So it's almost like rustic design is kind of telling a story through the materials themselves.
Yeah, exactly.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Like I'm already picturing like a cozy cabin with a massive stone fireplace and huge wooden beams.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And those materials are not just chosen for their looks either.
Yeah.
Like certain woods,
Yeah.
cedar, pine, they're favored because they're so durable
Hmm.
and their natural resistance to the elements. Like that was especially important in those early rustic homes.
Right.
And if you think about, those big fireplaces,
Uh-huh.
those were like a necessity back in the day,
Yeah.
for warmth and cooking. It's like each element, has this practical purpose rooted in history.
That is so interesting. It's like a peek into how people lived back then,
Right.
and how they connected to their surroundings.
Yeah,
Now, the guide mentions that there are all sorts of regional variations too, right?
absolutely. You have, the classic North American log cabin,
Uh-huh.
but then you also have, European rustic styles.
Yeah.
Like
Hmm.
the charming whitewashed cottages you see
Yeah.
with the exposed beams in the French countryside.
Yeah.
What's really great about rustic design is that it can be adapted to different climates and different cultures.
Right.
It's not a one-size-fits-all aesthetic.
So rustic isn't limited to just one specific look.
Right.
Hmm.
Yeah.
That makes me think about all those modern interpretations of rustic design that we see today.
Mm-hmm.
So is it possible to capture that rustic charm
Yeah.
in like a more contemporary setting?
Absolutely. You can definitely bring rustic elements into a modern home. So imagine pairing, sleek minimalist furniture
Yeah.
with like a backdrop of reclaimed wood walls.
Mm.
It creates this really amazing juxtaposition of old and new,
Yeah.
rough and refined.
I love that idea. It's like bringing a touch of history and nature into like a more modern space.
Exactly.
Okay, now I'm really starting to picture this rustic home taking shape in my mind. So let's say, we step outside.
Uh-huh.
What are some of the key features that just scream rustic from the curb?
Well, first and foremost, think organic materials.
Okay.
Wood siding is like a staple,
Yeah.
especially those durable species, like cedar, pine, or spruce.
Mhm.
You might even see like an entire log cabin exterior
Yeah.
for that quintessential rustic look.
Right.
And of course, there's stone,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
foundations, chimneys,
Mhm.
even partial stone walls
Right.
that add like a sense of permanence and
Mm.
connection to the earth.
I can practically smell the pine needles and feel the rough texture of the stone just thinking about it.
Right.
The guide also mentions board and batten siding as a classic choice.
Yeah.
That vertical look really adds a lot of visual interest, right?
It does.
And then there's the color palette.
Uh-huh.
It seems like rustic exteriors really stick to a pretty specific range of colors.
You're right, yeah.
Hmm.
Muted earthy tones are really what dominate
Okay.
rustic exteriors. So
Mm.
browns, grays, tans,
Mm-hmm.
those beautiful muted greens you see in nature.
Right.
These colors kind of allow the natural textures of the wood and stone to shine through.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean you can't have any pops of color.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine like forest green shutters
Oh, yeah.
or a barn red door.
Yeah.
Just used strategically to add like a touch of charm.
Oh, I love that. Like a little pop of color can make a big difference.
Yeah, it can.
Now, when I picture a rustic home, I
Mhm.
can't help but think of like a big welcoming porch. Yeah.
Is that a common element?
Absolutely. Porches, decks, and patios are essential to rustic exteriors.
Okay.
Yeah, they extend the living space outward
Yeah.
and they really emphasize that connection to nature.
Hmm.
So think about like a timber framed porch with cozy furniture,
Mhm.
maybe even a swing where you can just relax and enjoy the fresh air.
And what about landscaping?
Yeah.
Are there specific plants or styles that
Uh-huh.
really fit that rustic aesthetic?
Rustic landscaping tends to be pretty low maintenance
Okay.
and naturalistic.
Yeah.
You're likely to see like native plants,
Uh-huh.
wildflowers,
Yeah.
maybe some ornamental grasses, even gravel pathways.
Hmm.
It's all about, working with the natural surroundings,
Yeah.
letting things grow a bit wild,
Right.
rather than trying to create a perfectly manicured look.
Okay, so we've explored the rugged charm of the exterior.
Right.
Now I'm ready to step inside
Yeah.
and get cozy.
Uh-huh.
What are some of the defining characteristics?
Yeah, of like a rustic interior.
If I had to sum it up in one word, it would be texture.
Okay.
Think rough-hewn wood with all its knots and grains.
Yeah.
Exposed brick or stone walls, adding depth and a sense of history.
Mm-hmm.
And then, you have those handcrafted accents.
Yeah.
Everything from wrought iron fixtures to hand-thrown pottery.
Yeah.
It's all about creating a space that feels warm and inviting and full of character.
It's funny you mentioned texture. I
Yeah.
immediately thought about like all the different ways that light plays off of those surfaces.
Yeah.
What kind of lighting would you typically find?
Yeah, you're spot on.
Yeah?
Lighting is key in rustic design.
Okay.
It tends to be, soft and diffused,
Mhm.
creating that warm, intimate atmosphere.
Mm.
Think iron chandeliers with like flickering candlelight,
Uh-huh.
pendant lanterns casting soft pools of light, and
Yeah.
sconces adding a touch of drama.
Yeah.
And of course, natural light is crucial. Large windows and even open floor plans
Yeah.
help highlight the textures of the materials
Uh-huh.
and kind of bring the outdoors in.
Speaking of open floor plans,
Yeah.
I always associate those with like modern homes.
Yeah.
So is it possible to have an open concept space and still achieve that cozy rustic feel?
You absolutely can. While older rustic homes might have had
Right.
more compartmentalized rooms,
Uh-huh.
modern rustic interiors
Yeah.
often embrace open layouts.
Okay.
It's about creating a sense of flow and connection between the living spaces,
Yeah.
but, without sacrificing that cozy, intimate feeling.
So it's about finding a balance.
Exactly.
Yeah, between like those traditional elements and modern functionality.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now let's talk about the furniture.
Yeah.
What kind of pieces would you expect to see in a rustic home?
Rustic furniture is all about sturdy,
Okay.
substantial pieces crafted from natural materials.
Okay.
So imagine like a chunky wood dining table, a bed with a thick log frame,
Mm-hmm.
a well-worn leather sofa that begs you to just sink right in.
Yeah.
These are pieces that are built to last, the kind that develop beautiful patinas over time.
It sounds like the kind of furniture that just gets better with age.
Exactly.
Like it has a story to tell.
Right.
Yeah.
But does it all have to be antiques?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
Um,
Is there room for like newer pieces in a rustic setting?
that's one of the best things about rustic design. The mix.
Yeah.
Pairing antiques with newer pieces
Okay.
is a fantastic way to add depth and personality to a space.
Right.
So, picture like a contemporary sofa nestled next to a vintage trunk,
Uh,
or like modern light fixtures above a reclaimed wood dining table.
Yeah.
It's all about creating like a curated and collected feel.
I love that.
Yeah.
It's like creating a space that reflects your own personal style
Exactly.
and your journey.
Yeah.
Now, what about textiles?
What role do they play in rustic design?
Textiles are essential
Okay.
for adding warmth,
Yeah.
texture, and personality
Right.
to a rustic space.
Okay.
So think about like cozy wool blankets draped over a leather sofa,
Yeah.
a braided rug, adding warmth underfoot,
Uh-huh.
and like throw pillows with plaids and stripes,
Mm,
maybe even nature-inspired motifs.
okay.
It's all about layering textures and adding those tactile elements
Yeah.
that make a space feel inviting.
And what about accessories?
Yeah.
Are there like any hard and fast rules?
Rustic decor tends to be minimal and meaningful.
Okay.
So you might see like natural elements like pine cones, branches,
Yeah.
or even pressed flowers displayed,
Mm.
like really simply, items with a patina
Okay.
or a sense of history
Yeah.
also fit in beautifully.
Right.
The key is choosing pieces that tell a story,
Yeah.
that add to the warmth and character of the space without feeling too cluttered.
It's like each piece has a purpose or reason for being there.
Yeah.
Now I have to ask about fireplaces.
Uh-huh.
They seem to be such a central element in so many rustic homes.
Right.
Why is that?
Fireplaces really are like the heart of a rustic home. They provide warmth,
Yeah.
both literally and figuratively.
Right.
And they serve as like a natural gathering place. They can be made from all sorts of materials.
Yeah.
Like stacked stone, brick, or even wood. But they always make a statement
Yeah.
and add to that, cozy, inviting atmosphere.
So we've covered a lot of ground.
We have.
Yeah. From those eye-catching exterior features
Uh-huh.
to the warm textural elements of the interior.
Right.
But let's dive a little deeper into those specific materials
Yeah.
that are commonly used in rustic design.
Uh-huh.
I have a feeling wood plays a pretty big role, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's essential.
You're absolutely right. Wood is like the undisputed star of rustic design.
Yeah.
Oak, pine, cedar, hickory.
Right.
They all bring their own unique character to a space.
Uh-huh.
And reclaimed or salvaged timber is especially prized.
Yeah.
It's amazing to think about the history those pieces hold, like they're getting a second life in a new home.
Yeah. Yeah, it's that sense of history and connection to the past that makes rustic design so appealing. And, reclaimed wood isn't just beautiful, it's also a sustainable choice.
Now, wood might be the king,
Uh-huh.
but stone and brick definitely hold court in rustic design too, right?
Absolutely. They're essential for creating that sense of ruggedness
Yeah.
and permanence that we associate with rustic style.
Right.
Stone is often used for foundations,
Yeah.
fireplaces, and accent walls,
Right.
both inside and out.
An exposed brick,
Yeah.
whether it's left natural or
Yeah.
painted white for a softer look,
Right.
adds so much warmth and texture.
You do.
I'm picturing a cozy reading nook
Uh-huh.
with a wall of exposed brick and a comfy armchair.
Yeah, that sounds perfect.
Okay, so we've got wood, stone, brick.
Right.
What about metal?
Hmm.
Does it have a place in rustic design?
Absolutely aged metals like wrought iron,
Okay.
copper,
Yeah.
and patinode steel are frequently used
Or
in lighting fixtures,
Yeah.
hardware railings, and even decorative sculptures.
right.
Their weathered finishes add to that rustic narrative.
Yeah.
Like they're telling a story of time and use.
It's amazing how each material contributes to the overall aesthetic.
Yeah.
But rustic design isn't just about hard materials, is it?
You're right.
The guide talks about textiles and leather quite a bit.
They're crucial for adding warmth and comfort
Yeah.
and that, essential tactile element
Right.
to a rustic space.
Right.
So think like thick wool blankets, braided rugs,
Yeah.
and those leather chairs that just get better with age. It's all about creating a multi-sensory experience,
Okay.
a space that really engages all of your senses.
Now that we've got a solid grasp of the materials,
Uh-huh.
I'm dying to know more about how those rustic elements translate into specific rooms. The guide dives into rustic kitchens and bathrooms.
Right.
What are some of the key features that stood out to you?
Well, the rustic kitchen is often centered around a large island,
Okay.
often made of wood or stone, that serves as like a gathering place.
Yeah.
And a workspace. You'll see distressed cabinets, open shelving, displaying, well-loved pottery,
Right.
farmhouse-style sinks, butcher block or stone countertops.
Yeah.
And those beautiful metal pendant lights overhead.
I can picture it.
It's all about creating a space that's functional,
Yeah.
but also warm and inviting.
Right.
A space where you can, cook, eat,
Yeah.
and gather with loved ones.
It sounds like a dream kitchen. What about bathrooms?
Okay.
How do they incorporate that rustic charm?
Rustic bathrooms are all about creating that spa-like retreat.
Okay.
So think like natural stone or wood vanities,
Yeah.
vintage or trough sinks, earthy tiles,
Okay.
like slate,
Yeah.
travertine, or even pebble. Warm lighting from like
Yeah.
sconces or candles adds to that relaxing atmosphere.
I like it.
You know, it's a space that encourages you to just slow down and unwind.
Okay, all this talk of cozy kitchens and spa-like bathrooms has me itching to start incorporating rustic elements into my own home. But where do I even begin?
That's the question, right?
Yeah. I mean, the guide is packed with tips.
Yeah.
But what were some of the most practical pieces of advice that you found helpful?
One of the most important tips is to start with texture.
Okay.
Pick, like, 1 or 2 statement surfaces.
Yeah.
You know, it could be a reclaimed wood wall, a stone fireplace, or even a large piece of antique furniture, and kind of let those elements become like the foundation of your design.
So it's almost like choosing a focal point.
Exactly.
Yeah. Something that will really anchor the rustic look.
It's much easier to kind of build from there.
Right.
You know, layering in other rustic touches more subtly throughout the space.
Okay.
And when you're choosing pieces, focus on quality over quantity.
That's a good one.
You know, a few well-chosen handcrafted items will make a much bigger impact than like a lot of mass-produced pieces.
That's such great advice.
Thanks.
It's about being intentional with your choices.
Right.
What other tips stood out to you?
Don't be afraid to mix old and new.
Okay.
You know, pairing antique finds with contemporary pieces can create a really dynamic and interesting look. And then let nature be your guide when it comes to your color palette.
Right.
Stick to earthy tones like woodsy browns, soft greens, charcoal grays, and creamy whites. You know, you can add pops of color with accents, but keep the overall palette muted and natural.
That makes sense. Rustic design is all about connecting with nature.
Exactly.
So letting those natural colors guide your choices seems fitting.
Right.
And what about imperfections? Should I embrace them?
Embrace them.
Okay.
You know, scratches, knots, that beautiful patina that comes with age.
Right.
Those imperfections are all part of what makes rustic design so charming. You know, they tell a story, they add character, and they remind us that true beauty isn't about being perfect.
I love that perspective. It's about appreciating the beauty in those imperfections.
Yeah.
Now, for anyone who's looking to create a more eco-conscious home, what are some sustainable choices they can make when incorporating those rustic elements?
Sourcing reclaimed lumber is a fantastic way to be both stylish and sustainable. You know, you can also reuse old doors or windows to create like unique design features.
Right.
And when you are choosing new materials, look for sustainably sourced wood and energy efficient insulation.
Okay, so we've covered the key elements of rustic design. The materials, the colors, the textures. We even touched on some practical tips.
We did.
But like any design style, rustic has its pros and cons. Let's take a look at both sides of the coin.
Sure.
What are some of the biggest advantages of rustic design?
One of the most appealing aspects of rustic design is that inviting atmosphere that it creates. You know, rustic spaces just tend to feel warm, cozy, and welcoming.
That's definitely a big plus. What other benefits did you note?
Rustic design is incredibly durable. You know, those heavy timbers, stone walls, and sturdy furnishings can withstand like a lot of wear and tear, making them perfect for families or high traffic areas.
That's a great point. It's a style that's built to last.
Exactly.
What about the connection to nature?
Yeah.
Is that a benefit as well?
Absolutely. The use of natural materials and those earthy palettes create a very calming, grounding environment that kind of brings the outdoors in.
And what about the timelessness of rustic design?
Yeah.
Is it something that will go out of fashion?
Not likely. Rustic elements have like an enduring appeal that transcends trends. You know, those weathered woods and stones never really go out of style.
Okay, so there are plenty of reasons to love rustic design.
There are.
But let's be realistic. There are some potential drawbacks as well.
Right.
What are some of the cons that we should keep in mind?
One potential downside is the maintenance required. You know, real wood siding and exposed beams might need regular treatment to protect them from moisture and pests.
That makes sense.
And natural materials can be more susceptible to scratches and dents.
Right.
Although some people see those as part of their charm.
That's true.
Yeah.
What other challenges did you come across?
Rustic spaces can sometimes feel dark
Oh.
if there isn't enough natural light.
Yeah.
It's important to strike a balance with those darker, heavier materials.
Right.
And make sure you have ample lighting.
So it's all about finding that sweet spot.
Exactly.
What about the cost? Can rustic design get expensive?
It can.
Yeah.
Natural stone.
Yeah.
High quality timber. And those, one-of-a-kind antiques
Right.
can definitely add up.
Yeah.
But there are ways to incorporate rustic elements on a budget, too.
Okay.
You can get creative with DIY projects or look for affordable alternatives.
Yeah.
Like laminate flooring that mimics the look of wood.
That's great advice. And finally, is there a risk of, going overboard with rustic elements?
Oh, yeah.
Can you have too much of a good thing?
It definitely is.
Okay.
If you overdo it with the rough textures, aged finishes, and taxidermy, for example,
Right.
the space can start to feel cluttered, kitschy,
Yeah.
or even a bit like a theme park.
Right. Okay.
Restraint and thoughtful editing are key to achieving, that balanced, sophisticated rustic aesthetic.
So it's about using those rustic elements with intention,
Right.
and making sure they enhance the space, not overwhelm it.
Exactly.
Now, we've talked a lot about traditional rustic design, but I'm curious to hear more about how rustic design is being modernized.
Okay.
What are some of the trends that you've noticed?
One trend that's really popular right now is what we call rustic modern fusion.
Okay.
It's all about blending the warmth and character of rustic elements with the clean lines and simplicity of modern design.
Okay, I can see that.
Yeah.
But what does that actually look like in a home? Can you give us some specific examples?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Imagine a living room with exposed beams and reclaimed wood floors. But instead of a, traditional overstuffed sofa, you have a sleek, minimalist sectional.
Right.
Or picture a dining room with a rustic farmhouse table paired with modern metal chairs and a contemporary light fixture overhead.
So it's about finding that balance between the old and the new.
Exactly.
Yeah, the rough and the refined.
It's about creating a space that feels, both cozy and sophisticated.
Right.
A space that honors the past while embracing the present.
I love that. What other modern rustic styles are out there?
Another popular trend is what we call industrial rustic.
Okay.
This style combines rustic elements with industrial components, like exposed brick, metal piping, Edison bulb fixtures, and concrete floors.
I can see how those two styles would complement each other.
Right.
It's like adding a touch of urban edge to a rustic space. And then there's farmhouse chic, which is all about creating a light, airy, inviting space with a touch of vintage charm.
Right.
Okay, I can already picture it. What kind of design elements would you expect to see in a farmhouse chic space?
Think white painted wood.
Okay.
Pastel accents.
Yeah.
Vintage accessories. Like enamelware and old signage.
Okay.
And of course, shiplap walls.
Right.
It's all about creating a space that feels, cozy, comfortable, and full of personality.
Okay, so we've got rustic, modern, industrial rustic, farmhouse chic. It seems like there are so many different ways to interpret rustic design these days.
And that's one of the things that makes it so exciting. There's a rustic style out there for everyone, whether you prefer, a classic log cabin look, a modern farmhouse vibe, or something in between.
So as we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I'm left wondering, what's the one key takeaway about rustic design that you hope our listener walks away with?
I think it's important to remember that rustic design at its core is about celebrating authenticity, nature, and a connection to the past.
Right.
It's about creating spaces that feel genuine, welcoming, and full of heart.
Right.
It's not just about, the stuff. It's about the feeling.
That's beautifully said.
Thank you.
And for those of you listening, think about what aspects of rustic design resonate most with you. Maybe it's the warmth of wood, the ruggedness of stone, or the coziness of a crackling fireplace. Whatever it is, I hope this deep dive has given you some inspiration to bring a touch of that rustic charm into your own home.
I hope so too.
Welcome back to our rustic design deep dive.
Yeah.
We've covered so much ground from, the history and evolution of rustic design to practical tips for bringing those cozy elements into your own home.
I know. I've been thinking about what you said last time. About rustic design being like a journey, not a destination.
Yeah.
It's so true.
It is.
It's not about following a rigid set of rules.
Right.
It's about creating a space that feels, authentically yours.
That's a great point. It's about embracing the spirit of rustic design and making it your own. But before we wrap up, I think it's important to talk about some common mistakes people make when they're going for that rustic look. Are there any pitfalls we should try to avoid?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
One of the biggest mistakes I see is people going overboard with the rustic elements. Remember, balance is key.
Right.
Too much of a good thing can quickly make a space feel more like a theme park than a home.
So it's about finding that sweet spot.
Exactly.
Where the rustic elements enhance the space, but don't overwhelm it. Okay, so how can we avoid falling into that, too much rustic trap?
A good rule of thumb is to choose one or two key rustic elements as your circle points, and then layer in other rustic touches more sparingly. For instance, if you have a beautiful stone fireplace as a statement piece, you probably don't need to add a lot of other stone elements to the room.
Okay.
Let the fireplace be the star.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
It's about creating visual breathing room. And letting those key rustic elements shine.
Exactly.
What other mistakes do you see people making?
Another common mistake is neglecting the importance of lighting.
Okay.
Rustic spaces, especially those that incorporate a lot of wood and stone, can easily feel dark and gloomy if the lighting isn't carefully considered.
So how can we make sure a rustic space feels bright and welcoming, not like a dimly lit cabin in the woods?
Natural light is your best friend.
Okay.
If you have large windows, make the most of them. Keep window treatments light and airy to let that sunshine pour in.
Yeah.
And you can always supplement with a variety of light sources, like lamps, sconces, and pendant lights, to create a layered and inviting glow.
And what about the types of light bulbs we choose?
Yeah.
Does that matter?
It absolutely does.
Okay.
Warm white bulbs are perfect for creating that cozy, inviting atmosphere that's so essential to rustic design.
So we should steer clear of those cool white or daylight bulbs.
Yeah, I would say so.
Okay.
They tend to cast a more sterile light that doesn't quite fit the cozy, rustic vibe.
Right.
Now, another mistake I often see is people being afraid to mix and match.
Okay.
They think rustic design has to be all about antiques and reclaimed pieces.
Yeah.
But that's not true at all.
So it's okay to bring in some modern or contemporary elements.
Absolutely.
Okay.
In fact, mixing old and new can create a much more dynamic and interesting space. It reflects, your personal style. And keeps the space from feeling too themed or predictable.
Okay, I love that.
Yeah.
So give us some examples of how to successfully blend those rustic and modern pieces.
Sure. Imagine a rustic wooden dining table paired with, sleek modern chairs, or a vintage leather sofa next to a contemporary floor lamp with clean lines. It's about finding that balance. And creating a space that feels cohesive and personal, a reflection of your unique style.
So it's not about following a rigid set of rules. It's about being playful and creating a space that feels true to you.
Exactly.
Any other rustic design pitfalls we haven't covered yet?
One last mistake to avoid is neglecting the details.
Okay.
It's those little things that really bring a rustic space to life and make it feel special.
Okay, so what kind of details should we be paying attention to?
Think about things like, hardware, textiles, and those finishing touches that add personality. Choosing rustic-inspired hardware for your cabinets and doors can make a big difference. Layering in cozy textiles like throws pillows and rugs and natural fibers adds warmth and texture. And incorporating, those little touches of nature, like a bowl of pine cones, a vase of branches, or even some fresh flowers, can really bring the outdoors in.
Like those little touches of nature. And those well-loved pieces add soul to the space.
Exactly.
Now, before we say goodbye, I have to ask, what are some of your favorite examples of rustic design from around the world?
Oh, there's so many inspiring examples.
I bet.
One that always comes to mind is the Scandinavian approach to rustic design.
Okay.
They have this beautiful way of blending rustic elements with a minimalist aesthetic to create spaces that feel both cozy and incredibly sophisticated.
Right.
You know, think of lots of natural light, pale woods, and a focus on functionality.
I love Scandinavian design.
Me too.
What other examples are you drawn to?
I'm also fascinated by the rustic architecture of the American Southwest.
Okay.
You know, the use of adobe, wood, and stone creates a very unique and timeless aesthetic that's deeply connected to the landscape.
Right.
Those homes feel so grounded and organic, like they've grown out of the earth itself.
Yeah. Those are both fantastic examples.
Thanks.
It's amazing how rustic design can take on so many different forms and expressions.
Yeah.
Depending on the region and the culture. It really is a style that transcends borders.
Absolutely. And that's what makes it so endlessly fascinating and adaptable.
Right.
There's always something new to discover.
Well, I think we've covered just about everything there is to know about rustic design.
I think so too.
From its defining characteristics to modern interpretations, practical tips, and even inspiring examples from around the world.
It's been a great deep dive.
It has.
Yeah.
I hope this deep dive has left you feeling inspired.
Yes.
To bring some of that rustic warmth and charm into your own home.
Absolutely.
And remember, rustic design is ultimately about creating a space that feels authentic, inviting, and deeply personal.
Right.
It's about embracing the beauty of natural materials, the comfort of time-worn textures, and the warmth of a home that truly reflects your heart and soul.
I love that.
So go forth and create a space that feels truly yours.
Until next time, happy designing.